You're listening to Get to Know World of Warships, a podcast created by Boggzy and Synpax.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Clan Battles Week 3. Yeah, if you're hearing this, it should be during Week 3 of Clan Battles. So much going on. Borla, you played
you
a brawl.
don't feel like you know what you think about what's going on, though, there, Boggzy.
I don't, but you know what? Just for you guys, I'm going to leave that in and show you just how I process things in my brain is with odd non-words. You played a 1v1 brawl this morning, Borla. Was it delightful?
I won. I won't say it's delightful. So it's supposed to be 1v1, tier 8, and according to what I read, the ideal situation is you drop into a match against the same class that you are. I think eventually, once enough people play and people get spread out, it's going to be similar skill or at least similar progress in clan brawls. But I jumped in my Turpitz Black and dropped into, like, insta-queued into a match with a Lexington, Sleeping Giant, and because he wasn't able to spam planes fast enough, I was able to grab the caps, and I was going to run him down and win. I won based on the caps, but it was a short match. I shot down 37 planes. I spent the entire time just dodging and won the game, but it was probably the least fun game I've played in a long time. And with the wins being worth 1,250 XP, the handful of other games I played this morning, I did not get less than 1,250 XP in any of my losses.
Oh, wow.
So there's no reason for me with the rewards to play it. I guess if you like the idea of a 1v1 to spend your time on, that's great, but I didn't have fun and didn't find it very interesting.
Well, we'll talk about that for sure at length when we introduce our guest here, but there's also some news. Since we're clearly top-rate journalists, we should inform all of you who don't know yet that the first round of Clan Battles limitations and bans have been issued, and those are taking form in the Georgia and I almost said Georgia and Morja. The Georgia and Musashi getting outright banned, and the Mogador and Alaska being limited to one per team, which is I think is pretty significant. And again, when we bring on our guest here, we'll get into depth on that. But yeah, I was just about ready to smash my head against the pavement with that CB comp. So I don't know about you, but I'm pretty pleased about that.
I'm very glad the Mogadors were limited to one. It's a good comp, and it has a decent enough skill floor. The good teams that run it are very successful with it. I don't think it's fun to play against, even if you do beat those guys. I think limiting to one makes sense. I don't think the Mogador needs banned because you lose a lot of the significance if you can't run at least 3 of them. I was a little surprised that they picked both the Musashi and the Georgia. I kind of expected them to pick one or the other, not both. I don't remember running into dual Alaskas and it being a problem. So it surprised me that Alaska would be limited to one, but I guess they had to pick a ship to do that. The part that I was most disappointed in is I would have loved to have seen the limit of 2 ships of any one type or a single ship of any one type being implemented across the board. But I think what they did was all right.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I was pushing for, hey, please just limit it to 2 of one type. So you want 2 Mogadors, 2 Udaloys, a Black and Ooster Shimmy and a Georgia? Fine, whatever. We'll deal with your DD spam. But the Mogador, I think, was particularly oppressive, and again, we'll get to that. And why don't we go ahead and get our guest on, because he's waiting here patiently. So I am... we started this podcast in April, and the point was to get to know the personal culture of different clans and to sort of put a human element and a voice behind the names and clans that you see in game when you load in. So one of those things, though, that happened was we started to realize that people really enjoyed hearing about who people are in real life and what they do. I don't know if you know this, Borla, but I actually am an actor.
Really?
Yeah. I live in Los Angeles, and I've tried to be a stand-up comedian and an actor for 12 years, and have clearly done very well.
I'm surprised you've never brought that up.
I should have. I mean, I think it's relevant considering the fact that we're hosting a podcast, but at least it's out there now. So one of the folks that I've gotten to know over, I want to say mostly during quarantine, but one of the folks actually happens to be an EMT. He works in the emergency medical professional field, as well as playing lots of shooty boats, being a streamer, and having a couple other cool hobbies that will definitely press him on. So without further ado, please put your wings together for Ducky Shot. Hey, Ducky.
How's it going?
Did I really just say, please put your wings together? Am I a host of a 90s children's television show? Is that what I did?
I love you.
Jeez.
So, Ducky, first and foremost, your name Ducky Shot. It was inspired by the old Nintendo game, right?
No, that is a persona I've took on as my stream theme. But actually, in the fact that I am a duck and goose hunter, and I enjoy that a lot. My name Ducky does not actually come from that either. My name Ducky actually comes from me playing hockey. Back when I was 12 or 13, we were just playing pickup rec hockey with a bunch of guys from church and whatnot. And I started playing goalie, and I was using my grandpa's equipment from college back in the 50s. Whoa. And it was only about half effective. So I ended up ducking a lot of shots that would be high. So that's where I got the nickname Ducky.
No way.
Yeah.
It's because you're ducking shots.
Yeah.
I
thought the idea of a goalie was to stop the shots.
Well, he's Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't. I had enough American in me to know that I didn't want to take too many shots up high, right?
Now, you're a half-breed, so you're half Canadian and half American, right? Is that like Harry Potter? Like a
Muggle-born or Squib or something? Yeah, I think so. Pretty much the same thing.
Well, okay, so there's plenty we could talk to you about here, Ducky, and I'm kind of curious because lots of people do know actually who you are and they know your name because you're somewhat notorious. Would you speak a little bit to that, to the degree to which you're comfortable?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I guess I kind of got involved in the forums and such. I guess shortly after I started playing this game. I started playing this game in about May of 2016, so it's been just about 5 years now. And I started getting involved in the forums, and probably in the fall, winter of 16, 17 there. And I finally found that there was a lot of nonsense on the forums. It's kind of sad on the forums in the fact that the nonsense, the bait, the trolling, it gets more attention on the forums than, like, say, people helping and asking questions and things like that. And I am a prankster, I am a jokester in nature, so that sort of content definitely appealed to me, definitely on the troll and bait side. And I will say, when I first kind of got into that sort of thing, I definitely went too far, and it got personal with some people. And since then, I've kind of tried to rein myself back in, and I try to stick with satire and memes. And if I can, I really like if I can do like self-deprecating humor. If I can come up with something that makes people laugh at me, I'm all for that.
Right.
You know what that reminds me of, Boggzy?
What's that?
Our mutual friend JGHC.
Oh yeah.
When he was playing boats, I would be divisioning with him, and he loved to ask questions in all chat, like, do you know what the range of the Dallas Torps are? And he would get answers from people, and he was doing it self-deprecating, but he's like the friendly troll, like Ducky's saying.
The friendly troll, yeah. Friendly satire.
It's kind of like this morning. I was in a ranked game, and they were saying, "Oh, we should be able to dominate because we got this ship and this ship and this ship." And I was playing Plymouth, and we got the Plymouth, and I was like, "But our Plymouth is trash." And the dude did not realize I was talking about myself. How do you know? You looking at XVM or something? I'm like, no, I've seen him in game.
XVM, is that still a thing?
In tanks, it is.
I was gonna say I only know XVM from tanks. Has there been another WoW's monitor that I haven't been watching?
No.
Oh man, I had to stop using. I had to stop using matchmaking monitor.
Yeah, it took him quite a few minutes before somebody's like, he's talking about himself.
Right. well, okay. So Ducky Shot the Troll is no more and has since grown up. But I mean, I remember first hearing your name because you had a habit of posting very articulate and very profound theories. I want to say, would it be fair to call them theories or proclamations, or how would you describe them on things like Reddit and in the forums? Essentially charging that something nefarious was going on.
Like an in-depth look at something.
Sure.
And to me, that's always a big thing. As much as I like the jokes and the satire and whatnot, there are things that I disagree with, or within either with wargaming or with things in the player base, such as let me see if I can think of a couple right off the top of my head. Now I'm drawing blanks. Of course, there was probably the biggest one that people remember is kind of my deep dive on cheating, hacking going on in the game. Just about 2 years ago now.
That's where
that was a big Reddit post, right? I remember that. That was a really good breakdown, I thought, and possibly in my mind influenced what Wargaming ended up doing about it.
And I hope it does, because I did not want to publicize that there's a lot of cheating and hacking going on, but I also wanted to make sure it's not getting out of hand, right? And at that point in time, this was what, last March, I think, so just about a year ago is when that post went up. And at that time, the one hack program had not been detected for over a year. There had been no banways that had targeted that hack for over a year. Now, it has been detected since then, back in December. It finally got a ban wave. And because I'm in depth into those enough that I peruse their forums every once in a while. Mm-hmm. I got dragged in by not dragged in, but I was known to have some interest in seeing justice done to cheating and hacking and whatnot. And I was asked to do some analysis for somebody that, for obvious reasons, could not dive into that. Mm-hmm. And so I did some analysis on some things at one point in time. So I definitely had access to the forums to see what was going on, being said behind the scenes. I have a couple people from that post that will ping me every once in a while. There's one person, I'm not going to say who, a really nice person, fairly well known in the community, who, when he first got in the game, the original clan he got into required him to run hacks.
No way.
And the clan leader actually paid for everybody's hacks.
Wow.
And
well, yeah, we won't call out any names on that.
No, course, definitely not. But he's like this. He was like, he's incensed at his old clan leader for what he did and whatnot. But that guy still got access to the forums where those hacks are, and right. He pings me when he sees things every once in a while that I miss.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, though. Like, it's funny that you mentioned sort of, I heard you offhandedly say it as a bit of a throwaway, but I think it's worth mentioning that whenever you're discussing something like cheating or hacks or programs that in any way affect the game against the terms of service. I mean, obviously there's matchmaking monitors that show you how good certain people are. There's things in...
mod pack and Aslans.
Yeah, things that are supported by the game directly, like mod stations, or something that's perfectly fine, like Aslans, that has some borderline cheating things in it, which, I guess it would compress things that compress, like, shit. I'm getting so old, I'm forgetting what the word is. Damn it.
A lot of it's quality of life and speeds up
yes.
It speeds up the way that you can process all the information.
Oh my God. It's the things you can hear, smell, taste, and see, and tangible, experiential.
Tangible.
I'm so stupid. I haven't been in college in 14 years, and I'm getting so much dumber now. The things like it can take information, visual information.
Quality of life.
Yeah, and it can compress that for you and deliver it to you in the form of a number that you can react to much faster, obviously. And that's some of those things are borderline too good. Or I think the most common one that I see is the that people say this is basically cheating is the running lights that tell you whether something is accelerating or decelerating or what have you, or reversing. But whenever talking about these sorts of things, there's always this little caveat, at least in the back of my mind, and maybe you guys feel the same way, of like, are just by talking about it, are you in a way propagating it and making it happen more often or making it more common by drawing attention to it? What do you guys think?
Yeah, there's definitely that goes on with it, especially if somebody knows about it and has heard about it, them seeing my post isn't going to make them dig into it any deeper. But somebody who hasn't and sees that, then they might get curious and look into it.
Sure.
With good or bad intentions.
The thing about that particular post that I found most valuable was it explained to those who hadn't seen those things how many of them worked. And what I think is a big problem with the overall population of the game is there's a lot of people who don't understand the mechanics and what's on server side. And so you'll see people complaining about hacks or cheats in game for things that those who know the game realize it's impossible to cheat, or some of the things like the aim bots and other things, because of how long the shells are in the air, because of people moving and changing speeds, could be helpful, but if you're a really good player, they probably wouldn't be helpful. I think it really broke down the difference between those, and the overall attention that post got, I think helped clean things up. Now, were there some nefarious guys that went and looked at stuff? Sure. But I think overall, if you bring it out like that, it was an overall positive for the game and a negative for cheating.
Yeah, I would agree. Well done, sir. Well done, Nucky. You've been a force for good.
So there was definitely that deep dive. A couple other deep dives that I spent some time on was around the Julio Cesare back when they were reworking to maybe make it tier 6. I posted a few fairly lengthy posts about that. One of them was about, so Julio Cesare was released to the game, and I found multiple posts by CCs saying this thing is overpowered before it was released. Then after release, it got several buffs after it got released, and then removed from sale, and then, oh, wait, this ship's overpowered. Let's try and adjust it a tier. And it was like, well, there's a pattern. You guys should have known it was overpowered and should have known this. And so I did a deep dive on that and basically found everywhere where it had been buffed, everywhere people had talked about it being overpowered, like in the CC community, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then another one around that time that was an argument in the Warships community was about premiums getting buffed. And somebody was like, well, no, they never get buffed and this and that and the other. And I went through like four years of patch notes, and I found every time a premium ship had been buffed, and I brought it out and said, well, no, they definitely will buff underpowered ships that are premiums. Like, here's the proof.
Right. Wow.
The thing about the Julio situation that bothered me the most, if you remember when they began talking about moving it up to tier 6, I believe was in January or February, and it was the Christmas crates just before that, one patch where they put it in, like that was one of the ships they showed the picture of saying, hey, you might roll this valuable ship if you gamble on the crates, and encouraged people to go for the crates based on that ship. And a lot of people did. I know people who did. You guys probably know people who did. And then the very next patch, they said, oh, we're going to move it up to tier 6 now. And that's the part that I thought really stunk.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't. I mean, in the end, they did the right thing, right?
Honestly, I'm 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I would kind of like to see them balance out ships a little bit better, because I know they talk about, well, we won't go to clan battles at tier 7 because there's so many overpowered ships that so many clans don't have access to anymore. And it's like, well, now with the ban abilities, hopefully we can see maybe we go to some of those tiers and they are able to say, no, we're not letting those ships be played. We're not going to let your Belfast be played. We're not going to let your Flints be played. Not that Flint's overpowered right now, but the idea of it anyways.
Well, you mean the Flint that literally can get radared beyond its own maximum firing range?
Not if it's in clan battles, thankfully. but with Julio, I was like, okay, I want to see them balance that, but I don't want them to. I wanted it to be offered. We're going to rebalance it, but offer actual cash refunds for it. Because then to me it was okay. They can just throw anything out the door, not care about balancing it, and we'll offer you doubloons if we change it. Whereas if it's actually costing them money, that creates a situation where they want to make sure their ships are balanced on release as best as they can.
I also think the option they did with the Belfast, where you can't get the Belfast anymore, we're going to release a different version of it, and it's going to be a tier up. And not that the new Belfast is great by any means, but if they're going to try to rebalance a ship, I think the best way is to take it out of circulation. Now with the clan battles restrictions that they've started to play with, they can restrict it if they ever did clan battles at a tier where a ship like that was going to be part of the rotation, but then re-release it with some other, the number next to it or the year name or whatever, and let it be out there that way.
Definitely the Belfast, because that is a ship that is a tragedy that they had to remove from the game, because it's a museum ship. It's a ship people know, people visit.
Yeah.
It's awful that it had to be removed because it was overpowered. I mean, I like my overpowered Belfast, but I don't like it not being in the game available to everybody because it's such a historic ship.
Sure. It reminds me of the Belfast sort of reminds me of the Type 59 from World of Tanks for anybody who I got so frustrated with clan battles over the weekend that I reinstalled World of Tanks like a plebeian, and I played some, and I was reminded that I never got the Type 59. But it was just generally too good, so they just stopped selling it, and it's been power crept to death now, of course, but at the time, for a long time, there was just nothing that came close to it in terms of overall effectiveness at its tier. I felt like the Belfast was pretty much on board with that. It's funny, I remember when they released the Belfast 43, a lot of people were underwhelmed by it, and I was like, well, yeah, because you're comparing it to, this is the balanced version that the other one was not. So it's like you have an unbalanced ship and you complain about it being unbalanced, so they release a balanced version of that ship and people are like, well, this is terrible. It's trash compared to the other one. It's like, yeah, that's the point. It's supposed to, like, it's no one. I don't think anyone would ever call the Belfast 43 unbalanced. But
yeah, no, that I agree, and I think they can correct imbalance. If there's for premium ships that they're not going to nerf. Obviously, they have things like the commander rework, or when they made IFHE changes and things like that rebalance an entire skill or class, and those things can't be done very often. But I would rather see them take a ship out of circulation and release a different version of it at the tier that they feel is more balanced and after some more testing.
I think that's pretty reasonable. So speaking of which, I mean, we're chatting now about things like clan battles and balance and ships being taken out, so might as well just continue with that. I do want to get to what Ducky does for a living, because that I was fascinating to me. But speaking now, since we're talking about ships that were released that are no longer available because they're too good or what have you, or too versatile, we did just get our first promised, I guess, regulation of clan battles. We could call it regulation, where Wargaming decided to, once again, limit Mogadors to 1, Alaskas to 1, and completely remove the Georgia and the Musashi. The reason for the Georgia and the Musashi, I understand, and it's just because at Tier 9, the Musashi is the only thing that overmatches 32 millimeters, which gives it an extraordinary advantage over other battleships. And the Georgia, with the 457s, still overmatches the 30 mil deck armor of a number of cruisers. Which just gives these two battleships a head and shoulders advantage over every other choice. So I think that's pretty self-evident of why they decided to take that out. But I don't know. I mean, Alaska got nerfed to 1. I suspect it's because at lower levels, it's just too easy to do well in. You just take, 5 and 2 battleships, and there you go, and you could just sort of stumble your way forward to a victory. I don't really know why exactly they decided to limit that one. Mogador, obviously, just because it's just too damn good.
Let me ask you a question, Boggzy. Do you think they chose the picks because of the things you spoke to?
I doubt that I had
Or do you think, because I don't think so. I don't think so. What I think they did is they said, how many of these were used in game? Let's just take the highest used ones. Because I can tell you, we track a lot of data in our clan, and I'm not going into all the details, but essentially, for our 3 clans combined, which now you're talking hundreds of clan battles games between our 3 clans, we run in 6, 7, 8 teams a night. we're seeing about 80% of the teams we face run a Musashi and 75% run a Georgia.
Yeah.
And I think they just look strictly at that. And Alaska's was by far the highest used cruiser. My guess is they didn't think like the level you are and what calibers overmatch which armor and all the smart things. They just strictly look at population. The part that I would be interested in, were they looking at everything or just like the higher 20% of claim battles? I don't know about that.
And that's really the big question is us sitting here in a little circle around a campfire like the Neanderthals we are, trying to figure out, what folks in Europe are looking at in terms of how they choose to balance their game. Because I feel like the World of Warships community has a pretty adversarial relationship with the wargaming balance department. And I feel like part of it is like we're just trying constantly to read their mind so that we can predict things.
That was actually what was going to happen. Everybody was game planning what was going to be banned for the last 2 weeks, to the point where I was like, well, some of these clans aren't even running Mogadors anymore. I don't even know if they're going to get banned because we're game planning it so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, the question Borla had sort of stated there was like, well, how much do you think is based off of what is being used too much overall, and then what is granting the highest returns? Because like, I think the three of us here, all of us have played at Typhoon and Hurricane level gameplay in clan battles. We could, if someone said, hey, is the Alaska overpowered in clan battles, we'd go, no. And then go, really? It feels like it is. And we'd go, well, yeah, but I mean, Mogadors will absolutely eat Alaskas for breakfast. And they go, oh, Mogadors? I hadn't thought of those. And we're like, you probably should, because they're really good. It's like, it's an odd thing where a ship like an Alaska gets almost hard countered by Mogadors, but if someone's not running Mogadors, the Alaska may overperform. So how do you, knowing that it's not as simple as rock, paper, scissors, how do you go about trying to, I suppose, balance that? I have a feeling that the reason Alaskas were limited was because without Mogadors there to somewhat hard counter them, they may overperform. I don't know if things like Tashkents, Udaloys, what's the other spammy? Kitakaze. Yeah. I don't know if those could do the same thing. I feel like they won't. I feel like Mogadors have a uniquely pernicious ability to shrug off damage, to mitigate damage due to the speed, the handling, and the damage saturation mechanic. Not to mention that with IFHE, it pens a lot more than the other ones do. So I don't know. I have a feeling that Alaska was sort of like if we nerf the number of Mogadors you can bring, we also have to nerf the number of Alaskas. Otherwise, Alaska spam might be too good. That's what I suspect their logic was. What do you know? What do you guys think about that comparison?
Somebody needed to make sure there was at least one restriction or ban in each class of ships, and so that Alaska was highest of whatever.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that was part of it. Alaska was the most used cruiser that we saw by a huge, huge margin. Kronstadt was second, but maybe we saw about a fourth the amount of Kronstadts as we saw Alaska's. And that's, again, over our 3 clans. So it's not just at the top of the, KSC's in Typhoon and playing some of the top teams. That's across the whole spectrum of what we're seeing. And I think what Ducky said, some of each class. I also think when you're looking at this stuff, there's a difference between the top of Typhoon and Hurricane and the vast majority of teams, in that the vast majority of teams succeed with ships that have a lower skill floor. So you can plug more people in and they'll be okay and do relatively well in it. And the top teams are looking for ships that have a really high skill ceiling because they have a really high skilled player who understands mechanics and strategy and the rotations and the reads and all of those things.
Right.
And so you put them in a ship like a Mogador, you get 3 or 4 guys who are really, really skilled in a Mogador that has a really high skill ceiling. It's going to be exponentially better than if you put guys who don't understand all those things in the exact same comp.
Sure. I think that's pretty apt. What do you think, Ducky?
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm very curious to see, because we're all playing up at the Typhoon and Storm levels right now, and not sure. I haven't seen a whole lot of Gale and Squall for a while, and I'm curious what comps are down there.
I am too. I I have a suspicion that that's where an Alaska overperforms is for players that haven't really, they don't have a lot of comp experience and haven't sort of gone through the ringer of figuring out what works extraordinarily well, like a Mogador when sort of unleashed. I feel like it's really easy to just take an Alaska. It's sort of like the Graf Spee in the Tier 6 season where it's like, you don't need to be great to take, what was it, six Graf Spees in a carrier and do fine. Or in the tier, I guess it was Season 9. That was Season 10. So Season 9, you could technically just take 6 Venezias in a carrier and do reasonably well without too much difficulty. It's pretty uncreative, it's pretty it's non-dynamic, but again, it's sort of just like bashing your head against the door until the door just finally is like, okay, I give up, and falls over. So
I think it's less fun too. I like the seasons where you see a varied comp, where there's lots of different choices. I also think that makes it more dynamic with your team because you may have to flex and do things that you wouldn't normally have in your strat based on what you see.
Right.
Obviously,
Yeah, I like
high skill
moving
team.
target.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ducky.
Yeah, I like a moving target. It shakes things up a few times during the season.
Certainly.
I'm just hopeful that there's not some poor battleship player in Gale and Squall that's out of luck because he doesn't have any ships now.
I mean, it's true. It's when the top two, like Georgia and Musashi, obviously are premiums. So one could make the argument, it's like, well, there's tons of battleships. They're tech tree. They took away 2 ships that have the possibility that someone just doesn't have and can't get now. So I think that that's actually less of a major problem.
I would think so.
I also, on that, Boggzy, I do have to say that I was completely wrong at the beginning of the season. I don't know if you and I talked about this. I know I talked about it with my clan mates, and very few people who prognosticate come back and say I was totally wrong on this. But I did not if you had told me 4 of the 5 limited ships were going to be premiums, I would have been very surprised by that. We'll see what happens the rest of the season if they continue to treat premiums essentially the same way they did tech tree ships and just say, hey, this was played more, we're going to put a ban on it or limit on it. But I did expect Wargaming to treat premium ships with kid gloves when it came to the bans and restrictions, and I guess credit to them for not doing so.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I might get myself in a little trouble here. Wait, what am I saying? I'm not going to get myself in trouble. I'll be fine. Here's the thing. The Musashi was not brought back for money before the season. Unless you want to include the Santa crates. I don't know if
I got a Makarov in mind.
Was the Tier 9 season announced before the Santa crates were offered?
No.
Okay. So there was no direct incentive like, hey, Tier 9 is coming up. You're going to want a Musashi because obviously it's a Musashi. It's a Tier 10 boat at Tier 9, especially with Deadeye. It becomes, essentially a Yamato without Legendary module at Tier 9, which is, well, I think it's pretty self-evident why that's good.
Like Borla said, unless they were flogging his Tier 6 clan battle season, there was nothing like that in the Santa crates.
Yeah.
It definitely would have been Tier 6. Here's your Makarov for clan battles if they told us ahead of time.
And a Makarov for everyone. But like they did a sale before the Tier 9 season, which was, hey, the Georgia, the Alaska, I feel like there were others, are leaving it was also Småland and Massachusetts, but mainly the Georgia and the Alaska are leaving the armory and the premium shops. You can't buy them anymore. That's an incentive, knowing that there's a Tier 9 season coming up of, these are likely going to be good. Get them. Buy them, spend money.
To be fair, I have seen my guys completely go after whatever ships are going out of the armory because they're either collectors or because they want that ship or they're afraid something's going to come up. I can see a little bit of benefit from that, but not, I'm always willing to speak up when I think Wargaming's doing something that's kind of, not above board. But I think that that scarcity automatically creates a demand, whether the clan battle season was announced or not.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it's a marketing thing for sure, and The question is, are they doing that on purpose? And I don't know. I think the fact that they chose not to re-release the Musashi for money right before the clan battle season is a point in their favor, that they were not cynically attempting to cash grab off of it. Because frankly, if I had been someone who bought, if they had, let's say, they released the Musashi for money again in preparation for a Tier 9 clan battle season, and then 2 weeks in they banned the Georgia and the Musashi, I would be pissed. I'd be like, I bought this specifically for clan battles. If I were a consumer in that regard, I would be upset. I would feel duped. But I don't know.
And we'll see what they do either next week or the week after. My guess is these ships will be back in rotation.
I'm curious what's going to happen with that.
Do you guys? Here's my question to you guys, and maybe I'll start with Ducky. Do you feel like it was necessary to outright ban the Georgia and the Musashi, or do you think they should have done something like limit it to one, maybe, or something like that?
Well, if you look at the comps that you're facing, they're running one Georgia and one Musashi.
Yeah.
You can't really limit to one. If you had it limited, you can have a Georgia or a Musashi, but not both. But I don't know if they have that hardwired into their ban and restriction coding or not.
I feel like I should. I've said this a couple times, but I feel like I should clarify right now that oftentimes we're talking about what's common up at the higher tier of clan battles through, these are people who the stalwart Hurricane clan, suspects are people who optimize the strategies and the builds and the comps very quickly. They're very skilled. They're very intelligent about knowing what's capable, and so they can extrapolate right out of the gate pretty much, hey, I think this is going to be hyper dominant or what have you. But I've been told by my audience sometimes that, hey, not everybody knows what the hell you're talking about. So I feel like I should clarify that one of the most, right now at the top end, at least on North America, and I have heard whispers from the other servers that this is the same case, that the comps pretty much look like 4 Mogadors, 1 black, and 2 battleships, either the Georgia or the Musashi. I've seen 3 Mogadors, Nustra Shimmy, black, and then those 2 BBs, but that's pretty common. If you're not someone in a clan who's up facing that a lot, it's not going to be self-evident to you why those things are so good. But there's a reason why they're so good and why they work so well together. So when we're talking about it here, that's really what's the most common thing, is a heavy Mogador strat because of their speed, their damage saturation, their damage output, and their ability to shrug off damage and go dark by speed juking.
So what do you think? What do you two think is going to replace those 2 ships at Battleship? Since most people, as you said, are going to have to replace both of their battleships.
That's a good question. What do you think, Doug?
Boggzy, but it's not a very common battleship. But I think Boggzy's going to be the number 1 pick for those who've been playing Musashi. And I guess if you want some speed or something and maneuverability behind what made the Georgia good, I guess the bargain basement for that is Iowa or Missouri. But I think I think you'll see a lot of Izumos as well, though.
Yeah, I think Beiji and Izumo are pretty. If you want something that accurately cross maps and hits really hard, that's your substitution for Musashi. The Georgia is such a unique boat that it's not clear to me outright what replaces that in terms of its highly accurate, heavy hitting guns and really fast mobility.
Yeah, What's that?
I said no Pommern?
Well, I think it depends on what you're asking from each of those ships. I think for the Georgia, we are going to see some Jean Barts because of the speed with their, speed boost, and the main battery reload boost is good. People use it in a kiting position. A lot of its secondaries are off the back end. With other things, like if you're asking it to tank a lot, a Lion, maybe you'll see some of those things.
Oh my
for
god,
the Musashi,
that would be amazing.
Right? And for the Musashi, I agree. The Boggzy's a really good one. The other thing that I think some people might try, because what we saw with our cruisers, when we had a problem with a cruiser getting worked down by Mogadors, it usually also took at least one heavy cross shot from Musashi somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It was in a spot where 10, 12, 15K got taken off by Musashi, and then it couldn't disengage from the Mogadors, or we couldn't rotate people in fast enough to help with it to get the Mogadors off of them. Do you think anybody will try like a Minnesota for those really heavy shots? Because remember, we're not going to have Mogador spam.
Right.
We're, I'm not a proponent of it, but I think there might be some people who fool around with it because of the really heavy broadside against cruisers, and I think cruisers really, really gain from these bans, both Mogador and from the limit on Mogadors and from the ban with the Musashi in Georgia. I think we're going to see, instead of 0 to 2 cruisers, I think we're finally going to see a more balanced lineup with some people.
Yeah, I'm. I mean, let me say I'm net hopeful on this. I think that the limiting of Mogadors is good. I saw some people on the CC Discord from other servers sort of lamenting it, sort of saying, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because now everyone's going to dust off their Tashkent and Udaloy and Shimakaze. And I got to be honest, there was a reason people weren't running those ships before. There was a reason why they ran Mogador over that, and it was because the Mogador was just superior in just about every way, I would say, to those ships. I also think that cruisers have a much, much easier time of handling things like Tashkent, Udaloy, Shimakaze than something like a Mogador. The Shimakaze is a bathtub. It's slow and it's not maneuverable, and it's big and fat. It loves to eat torpedoes while it sits there and smoke. We ran up against Shimikazes early in the while we were still moving through gale and early storm, and we have a Benham player who's exceptionally good, and he would every single time we'd run up against a double Kitacomp, he'd kill one of them with torpedoes, with Benham torpedoes, and it was just the funniest thing in the world because they just sit there in their smoke and think nothing can hurt them. But I think, I'm sorry, your question was about battleships, and I'm a butter.
Something shiny popped up and you were distracted. I get it. That's fine.
There's a bunch of butterflies right now trying to tango in my brain. That's how things work.
What do you think about talking to Ducky about Ducky?
Let's talk about Ducky about Ducky. It's been 42 minutes. We still need to have him sink a ship, and we need to have him tell us about what he does for work and stop talking about warships. So, Ducky, why don't you tell us what you do?
Well, the main reason why you're asking that is my casual job, which became full-time a bit last year. My regular work is Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, is at a farm equipment dealership. Who knew in Saskatchewan we had those? But
sorry, what was it?
A farm equipment dealership.
Oh.
And then my casual job that I worked full-time for several years is as an EMT. Up here we call them primary care paramedics. A little bit more skills available to us and drugs available to us than your typical EMT in the States. I worked at I went to college for it right out of high school.
You heard it right there from the mouth of a Canadian, ladies and gentlemen. Drugs are more available in Canada. Bang.
And actually, they probably are. So yeah, I worked at full time for a few years in rural Saskatchewan here, and then I came back to my hometown, got a good job offer there, but I've always enjoyed EMS, and I've always stayed in it. I've stayed casual with the service I was working at, and I usually end up working, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 weekends a year. I'll go and I'll work. At the beginning of the pandemic here, the first lockdown's pretty much just about a year ago now. It was slow, and yeah, we are 1 year into our 2-week lockdown, right?
You just hit me in the face with a brick of reality.
So back then, I was pretty much caught up at my day job, and the ambulance service I pick up casual shifts at was shorthanded, and nobody knew what was going to happen with the pandemic. Everything was such an unknown. How bad's it going to be? What's going to happen? Who's it going to affect? This and that and the other. So I basically gave them a blank check and said, whenever you want to schedule me, I can come back full time for basically until it's over, or springtime.
Right.
But anyway, so I ended up going back full time, working ambulance for about 6 or 8 weeks there during the first lockdown.
Sorry, keep going.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask just because, obviously the thing to wonder about is about the pandemic and about COVID, and I'm kind of curious. Do you know what you're being sent out to? You must. I mean, if you're driving an ambulance, you must know what the call is for. But are you able to sort of give us an idea of how often you were called out to snag folks who were sick with COVID who had to go to the hospital?
Right. Initially, as the health system moved into things changed like weekly, daily on how things were being dealt with. And at the beginning, definitely a lack of PPE forced us to not go to every call with PPE. So it was basically being divvied out. Okay, if they have any kind of symptom like flu-like symptom, cough-like symptom, cold-like symptom, basically we're using our PPE, and we were not using masks and whatnot if you're going for a hurt leg or a fall or an overdose or whatever. And so it was basically being determined by dispatch telling us when we weren't going to be using the personal protective equipment. Initially, Saskatchewan was obviously we're rural, we're a little bit away from the mainstream, so it took a while for the pandemic to get to us initially compared to everybody else. And actually, last spring and summer were pretty slow, honestly, on the pandemic side. Honestly, I'd say our calls for self-harm and things like that went way up.
Oh,
and,
yikes!
Yeah, for sure. And then
I'm kind of curious. Does self-harm, does that category include things like overdose?
Yeah, a lot of overdoses.
Oh, okay.
Which overdoses are fairly common for the service I work at, just with the demographics and whatnot. Overdoses are fairly common, but there was an increase in them, and there's definitely an increase in other things, suicide related and whatnot, for sure.
Sure, yeah.
So we actually never really got hit hard with COVID until actually last fall, and I'd say last end of October, early November is when our numbers started climbing, like everybody else's. But we'd been pretty insulated throughout the spring and summer, and I think there were times during this winter when we were I think we were leading per capita on the COVID cases in Canada, and definitely we cover one area community that definitely seems to affect a lot more was Native Americans and or Native Canadians, I guess, in this case. But
yeah.
we cover multiple reserves in our service, and I think at one point in a community of like 700 or 800, I think there was about 100 positive cases at once.
Wow.
And
Wow.
So there was a few weekends I worked this winter where basically I'd say 3/4 of the calls we're going to are COVID related. So,
Man.
and I'd say, and a lot of it's like, you're having a little bit of trouble breathing when you're exerting yourself. Yeah, you have a bit of a cough, but there's no reason for you to go to a hospital. And a lot of it was just patient refused service. You basically not coach them. You basically talk them and say, well, they're not going to do anything for you at the hospital. Basically, if it gets worse than this, yes, let us know. But you're fine right now. You're going to stay at home. So there was a lot of that going on.
That's really interesting, and I want to pick your brain a tiny bit more about that. About specifically, you said there's sort of this gray area between someone says they have symptoms and they're worried, so they call an ambulance or they call the hospital or whatnot, and you guys show up and go, you don't need to go to the hospital yet, but if it gets worse, do so. I mean, how do you? It's what were some, I guess, not flashpoints. God, I'm so dumb. What were some thresholds? That's the word I'm looking for. What are the thresholds for, okay, if this happens, you need to go to the hospital?
I would say basically if they're in a resting position and they're having some difficulty breathing, yeah, we're going to take them to the hospital, because if it gets much worse than that, it's not good. Whereas if it's okay, when I got up and went to the bathroom, I was huffing and puffing a little bit, I'm sitting down on the couch now, I'm fine. Yeah, you're good. Like, I don't know. I haven't had it. I know a few people that have. One of them was a streamer I watch every once in a while. But
oh, is that right? Did he maybe crap his pants because of COVID?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he may have.
So yeah, and it's different for some people. Like some people, like there was literally one person called us to her house because, yeah, I've been having trouble breathing for a couple of days, and they called me today and said I'm positive, and so it's like, okay, so you're positive, okay. You had a little bit of trouble breathing. She's like, yeah, and it was worse on Tuesday. It's like, okay, so it's better now? Yeah. It's like, okay, so the only thing that's changed now is you're positive. So
right. I mean,
how close were the hospitals and other facilities near you to being capacity? Like what things change? I asked for perspective. My wife works for a local hospital, so
So
she's not clinical, but she trains a lot of the people who deal with those things. And there were a lot of changes and a lot of impact for her job. Fortunately, she didn't get COVID and was able to be vaccinated in the first wave because of her job. But it's the other side of the story that you're telling.
Mhm, for sure, and that's definitely something that affects us. We actually, I think our service is probably covers one of the largest areas of any service in North America. I don't think there'd be very many services do more. I think we cover about 40,000 square kilometers, about 25,000. I think that's about right. I don't know. Or sorry, 25,000 square kilometers. So I don't know what that is in miles.
I don't know what a kilometer is.
Yeah. I'd say it's about 1.6 square
15,000.
kilometers. Yeah, 1.6 square kilometers makes a square mile. So we're probably in the 10 to 15,000 square miles that we cover. And we have a huge, like when I say I'm busy on a weekend, 8 calls is busy for me on a weekend because each of those calls probably takes about 3 hours in length because the calls would be about 40 minutes to an hour away from the hospital.
Yeah.
So by the time you go out there, you get back to the city and then drive back to our base and whatnot. Yeah, we're talking 3 hour calls.
Wow.
So 3-4 calls and you're up at 9-12 hours of work in that period. So so a lot of those, like I talked about the reserves, that's where the one base that I work at mostly. That's what we're doing most of our calls from, and they're 40 minutes to an hour away, both of them. There's one that's about 3 hours away, and so it would see a lot more, if somebody was more serious, it would see a lot more air ambulance or visits there to pick up the patients rather than road.
Right. Huh. Wow.
How's the vaccine rollout in your area, or what's going on there?
I think we're going through, and I think they've pretty much got most of the what they would call level 1 health providers done, and so now they're looking at level 2 health providers and senior citizens now. I know most of my service was vaccinated on nurse refusals. Apparently, when the nurses were getting it, there was enough refusals that they shoehorned most of our paramedics in. I found out about that at 102. I was emailed at 102 that day and said, there's vaccines available between 1 and 3 o'clock, and I live an hour and a half away. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not risking that it's available when I get there. So
right.
So actually, I haven't received it yet. I know they have us scheduled in for our regular schedule, I guess, in another week or so.
Wow. Well, I can say from my own experience having COVID, which I did over Christmas. It was awesome. I had symptoms for maybe 3 days, and then I was fine. The worst symptom was that I crapped my pants. That was just...
That is a bad symptom.
Wonderful. I had maybe 3 hours of labored breathing, and that was actually a little scary because you just don't know how... the thought ran through my head of, well, okay, I'm literally struggling to breathe just lying here. I can breathe, but it's uncomfortable, and it sort of sets you into this mindset of like, well, how much, if this gets worse, how much time do I have before I asphyxiate to get to a hospital? And what, again, I was mentioning threshold earlier. It's like, I actually don't know. And that elicited a certain sort of panicked reaction from me. My girlfriend Bree struggled for probably 3 to 4 days to breathe, but refused to go to a hospital because she's a beautiful monster. So, yeah.
Speaking from the health side of things, I would say patients struggling to breathe are some of the scariest patients you will ever deal with. Just because it is such a frantic situation, and sometimes it's a very hard situation to correct in some instances. So
I feel like also the more, if you're struggling to breathe and you start to get extraordinarily anxious, stop me if I'm wrong, but that actually starts to close your lungs too, doesn't it?
Yeah, anxiety is definitely not going to help you.
It's literally a self-fulfilling prophecy. Borla, if you want to go ahead and mention the vaccine, by all means.
So, like I said, my wife was vaccinated. I am in an essential category that my county has already rolled out to. So I just got my second shot 2 days ago. A lot of people are afraid of the vaccine, and talking to some doctors that I know on a personal level, kind of in a 90-second nutshell of why this vaccine was able to come through so fast and get approved. The basic science behind it is the same type of science that goes into some other vaccines. The problem that most vaccines have with getting approved in a short amount of time are threefold. It's one, the money to do all the research and development. Two is volunteers, to get enough people to be the volunteers for both the placebo and the vaccine. And then the third part is having enough people exposed to the vaccine to get proper data for it. So in this case, the money wasn't an issue because the governments and drug companies were throwing so much money at this because it was such a huge problem. The second part about volunteers was overcome very quickly because everybody knew about COVID and many people were willing to sign up to volunteer. And the third part, because it was a pandemic, there were so many people exposed to it, they were able to get data. So for anybody out there who's considering the vaccine, whether to be vaccinated or not, when you get your turn, that's why it was able to be rushed. So the people who are afraid of the effects and side effects and everything else, yeah, some people get some chills and fevers after the shot, the second time, especially for half a day or whatever. But it's not some new type of technology or new type of medicine. It's things that were able to be. It was a perfect storm in a positive way that allowed this vaccine to come through so quickly. Having been informed and talking to people who are far more informed than me, I would just encourage people to do what they can to get vaccinated when it's their turn.
And I probably won't be able to travel across the border, and the in-laws live in the U.S. I think it's I don't think there's much of an argument in my family right now, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, at some point there probably are going to be restrictions on people who haven't been vaccinated. That is probably what I foresee happening. But I'll get off my soapbox, not Boggzy.
Oh no, that's okay. That's perfectly fine.
No, but I've had, a lot of people, and I didn't know until I had a doctor. I'm like, can you explain it to me? Like, I haven't gone through medical school. I don't understand the science. Like, can you explain it to where like a high schooler can understand? And he broke it down, those three things. It just made so much sense.
Right.
Why they were able to do it faster.
I just want to know where you got a soapbox from. Were you hoarding it this whole time?
Do soapboxes actually contain
Amazon
soap?
Subscribe and Save, man. I had like 3 extra boxes of toilet paper and 3 extra boxes of paper towels in my basement. I was afraid to let my friends know. I thought somebody burned down my house for the toilet paper.
Oh, so you're the one who took all the toilet paper?
No, I had it ahead of time. I didn't go to the store. Like, I was in the store and I'm looking at these people with 7 things of toilet paper, and I'm like, oh, and you want to know the other secret, Boggzy?
Yeah.
Buy a bidet, man.
Everybody, get your Peepo riots ready. I'm ready to
Get
riot.
your bidet off of Amazon.
My bidet?
You won't need as much toilet paper.
I don't need to get.
Are you a savage?
I don't need to get. What were those? I don't need my derriere to get super soakered to feel clean. Okay, let me just put it that way. But also, I heard that they're delightful. So if you're in the market for a bidet, call Borla. Go to the KSC Discord and ask Borla for recommendations on butt squirt guns. There you go.
Real nice.
Ducky, would you please do us a favor, and would you please sink a ship? I'm sure you've heard the delivery and the wind-up and the setup for sink a ship, but last time you were here, you were on a quest to remove a certain class of ship, and if the Verizon tournament, this clan battle season, and COTS are any indicator, you were successful and you are therefore a hero. So because of that, I offer you the opportunity to sink one ship. What's it going to be?
Man, I wanted to be so non-cliche on this one. And honestly, when you had me on last time, I was going to be non-cliche, but then you guys didn't have us actually do sink a ship.
I know.
And I was going to be non-CV that time. It was Canada Day. I was going to say Z23 because Haida sunk 2 of them, so let's just take it out of the game.
Oh, wow.
But I thought about it, and there's nothing I despise playing against more than FDR. So.
Yep. FDR. It's quickly becoming a trope on Sink a Ship. The FDR. I think that's fair. I think it requires no explanation. But I think when you guys were on last time, the entire thing was, hey, we'd like to sink an entire class of ships. So I think you got your sink in. But
yeah, I think we did, but I was totally prepared for the non-cliche non-CV sink a ship.
I will never forgive Sub-Octavian for wanting to sink the Khabarovsk. That man is a mad scientist and a misanthrope. That just crushed me inside a little bit when he did that. But let's do this, because there's one more thing I want to ask you about before we have you plug your stream and anything else you'd like to plug, and that is, you have a very cool hobby revolving around World War II hardware. Would you please tell the audience a little bit about what you do for fun?
In addition to playing World of Warships, I do enjoy building scale models. I'm always been a history buff ever since I was a kid. I've always loved history, World War II, World War I to an extent. And so I've been building models here probably just about going on 20 years now. Yeah, I was probably about 13, 14 when I picked it up as a hobby. And I mostly build armor, 135th and 172nd. I do build the odd airplane and the odd ship. Airplanes, I'm mostly interested in World War I aircraft. I have a dream of building a series of Canadian aces from World War I. Eventually, I had a bunch of them done, but when I lived at my sister's a number of years ago, my nephew and his friend got into the display cabinet for a little bit, and so most of those went out the window. But I do enjoy building the models.
At least have Red Baron outfits on or something as they crashed all the Canadian planes.
Maybe a Snoopy costume.
There it is. Well, Duck, is there? We appreciate you being here. It was great to chat with you and to shoot the breeze on Warships and then hear about what you were doing in real life. Is there anything you'd like to plug that we can put down in the description below and that we can mention right now?
Definitely my stream. Been streaming Warships for a couple of years. I started off as a dare or a bet or as a joke from my clan back in Rust. We were talking about Biggie and Rust earlier, Borla. That's where I started streaming from because I had terrible internet here in rural Saskatchewan.
The 480p.
And I streamed in 480p, 20 or 24 frames per second as where I started on. And over the last couple of years, I've actually gotten halfway decent internet. I can actually stream in 1080 now. I do got some packet loss issue errors, but they're nothing too big. It works.
I can confirm though, as someone who likes to watch your stream, you've got a great quality stream. You're a friendly guy. You've got great audience interaction, and you're knowledgeable. So if anybody's looking for a fun streamer to watch, Ducky Shot is absolutely one of them. Do not make the same mistake that I have done and assume that it's Ducky_shot as it is in Discord. It's Ducky_shot_. I have rated some poor dumbass named Ducky_shot who doesn't exist and doesn't stream at least 3 times now because I didn't add the extra underscore at the end, and I've consistently felt like a dumbass for it.
And in addition to streaming Warships, I have started doing more regular, actually, model building streams. So
no kidding.
Yep. If you catch me, I'll probably go on this afternoon later. Monday, March the 8th, because I know this probably doesn't air right away anyways, but yeah, I will be probably streaming, working on my Bofors 40mm.
Very
really
cool.
Been a pleasure talking to you, Ducky. I know you just alluded to a guy in my group, Biggie, who was with you long ago, and he gave me a long list of things. We didn't get to talk about all of them, but it's been a pleasure to have you, and hopefully we can have you on again some other time to talk about some of those things.
I know I will have a very long series of streaming building a 172nd Liberator. I went and did some research and finally found planes that my great uncle was in, and actually found some aftermarket decals for it. So
that's great. Is there
I have great.
Is there a place where people can like, if anyone is hearing this right now and going, oh dude, I want to see these, where could they find images?
My Discord.
Okay, and we'll include a link to Ducky's Discord down below.
I have great respect for people who have the patience to do models in great detail, because I've built a few long ago and I just want to get them done so that the quality suffers. So people who can actually, paint it all right, let it dry, wait a day or two, do a little more, and have it turn out really, really nice. Some of you guys do really, really quality work.
There's really good guys out there.
Well,
I've been in a number of communities over the years, and there's some really good modelers.
yeah, I asked you, I asked you how in the hell you actually get the sort of dirty, weathered, mottled look for the paint, and you said that there was a specific thing you do where you put cheesecloth on it and sort of spray it, or what was it?
No, dry brushing.
Dry brushing. Okay.
Yep, dry brushing. You put your paintbrush in some paint and pretty much dry it off, and all you're left with is pigment on your paintbrush, and it'll highlight the high points of your model. So you usually do a lighter color for that.
I see. Okay, so it doesn't have the liquid. It doesn't have the higher degree of liquid in it to sort of fill in the cracks. It just catches whatever it hits first.
The high whatever catches and drags against your paintbrush when you're going over it. So the high points.
That's very cool. They look really amazing. So anybody who likes seeing scale models of World War II equipment, go to Ducky Shot's Discord, the Duck Cord, and check them out. These are really cool. So, and with that, that's all I got, gentlemen. Ducky, it's been an absolute pleasure. Borla, thank you as always for co-hosting, and yeah, thanks a lot, gentlemen.
My pleasure, Ducky.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And as of course, thank you to all of you who continue to listen. It's always a pleasure making these for you. So we'll catch you next time on Get to Know World Warships.